I'm Ed Barker from Studio 1878. We're a company that helps brands create standout podcasts that also sound great. Today we're picking up on part 3 of my video series on storytelling. So far we've talked about why storytelling works and the kind of story shapes that can make your content a lot more engaging. Now we're going to layer deeper and we're going to think about what you can listen for when you're actually recording your episodes. Because whether you're hosting the show yourself or working behind the scenes as a producer, perhaps a marketing pro within a company, and you're reviewing the recordings after the fact, this is where storytelling really begins to show up. Or not. Most people think storytelling happens in the edit, but it starts right here, in the moment. When the mic is live and your guest is talking, or you're mid-solo episode and something sparks. It can be the difference between an okay episode and a great one, and it often comes down to whether you caught that spark and built around it, or whether it kind of slipped by unnoticed. So the big question today is, what are we actually listening for? And let's start with the most powerful one, change. When someone says, "That's when I realized," or "We just didn't see it coming," that moment changed everything. Your ears should perk up. That's the story trying to break through. That's the turning point. And it's almost always where something important is just sitting beneath the surface. If you're the host, that's your cue to pause and stay with it a little longer. Ask what changed, how they felt. Ask what happened. The raw material, your story arc, is almost always hiding in these moments of transition. It's when the speaker goes from one mindset to another, from uncertainty to maybe some clarity, from a moment of comfort to some risk. If you're producing a podcast, flag that section immediately. You can shape your episode around it. Another thing to listen for, and this one's just as important, is the emotion. It doesn't have to be really dramatic. It could be subtle. It could be a catch in the voice or a laugh that breaks through. A moment of real frustration or surprise. When someone steps out of their polished answer into something a bit more spontaneous and vulnerable, you're suddenly in the real stuff, I think. These are the moments listeners do remember, not because they were scripted or profound in some way, but because they felt real and true. So when you hear a guest go off script, you don't need to yank them back. You can actually let them go. That's where the story is going to live. And if you're hosting, try to stay within the emotion instead of moving on to your next planned question. Even if that's just saying, "That sounds like a really big moment," it can open up something much deeper. Specifics make people lean in. There's a world of difference between, we had some onboarding challenges and our onboarding email had 14 links and not one person clicked on it past the second one. The second version paints a picture. You can almost see it. And when you can see it, you can feel it. And more importantly, you'll remember it. When you hear those kinds of details, concrete details that come out during a recording, you can stay close, or you can invite more. You can ask for examples. Get them to paint a picture fully, because that's where your story gains weight and credibility. So here's another one. What's the risk? Why does this matter? If someone's telling you about a decision they made or a challenge that they've been facing, you want to understand what would have happened if it had gone the other way. Was there a reputational risk or a resource gamble of some kind? Was there a personal or emotional stake in this? Too often in business content, we gloss over the stakes because we want to look like everything was under control, never take any risks. But the truth is, the best stories come from that tension. And the tension only exists when something's really at stake. So listen for that. And if it's not obvious, you can ask, what was riding on that decision for you? What would have happened if it hadn't have worked out? And then there's one I really love. surprise. If someone says something that contradicts your expectations, that's the story try to crack open. It might be a moment where they say, honestly, I thought this was a terrible idea when we started it, or we were completely misread the market, or the expectations didn't match reality, and something unexpected happening. You're really in narrative territory there. These surprises create a real energy, they're memorable. They pull the listener in because we're wired to pay attention when things don't go as planned. So when someone surprises you, you don't need to breeze past it. You can slow down actually. You can dig in, you can ask about what they learned or how they adapted. Ask what changed. It might be uncomfortable, but it's going to be a great storytelling exercise. Now this applies if you're doing a solo episode as well. Just because you're not interviewing someone doesn't mean you can't listen and use these skills on yourself. So when you're recording solo, listen back. Are you telling stories or are you just listing a series of facts? Are you giving the listener any tension, any reason to keep listening? The transformation that we talked about earlier. Sometimes it helps to bring in a short personal example. You don't need to tell your life story here, but sharing a small, specific moment, perhaps where you got it wrong, it can add humanity to your voice and make your episode resonate all the more. And if you catch yourself drifting into generic tips, why don't you pause and ask yourself, is there a real moment I can share that makes this feel alive? And one thing I think that we can talk about as well is silence. And the silence says something. It lets people land on an idea. You can let it breathe. You don't rush to fill the space after someone said something interesting. I think to the point about personal stories, I made this mistake quite a lot in the past, especially early on when I was making content. I was so focused on keeping the conversation moving that I'd jump in the second there was a pause. I'd edit this way as well. But I think silence can go a really long way. It can give weight to what you've just said. It lets the listener feel something instead of just processing it. And if it's too long, you can trim it later. But in the moment, why don't you trust the pause? So here's what I want you to take away from this video. When you're recording, you're not just collecting words, you're listening for moments that really matter. Moments of change, moments of emotion, specificity, stakes, surprise. That's where the story can really show up. It's where you can start hearing it in real time. You'll not only make your interview stronger when you can do this, but you'll make your editing sharper as well. Your episodes will become richer and your audience will become more invested in what you're saying. On the next video in this series, I want to talk about what happens after recording, how to shape those story moments when you're editing. If you want help developing your show and creating a stronger narrative spine, or if you'd like me to listen to an episode and point out where the story's hiding, why don't you drop me a line, hello@1878.studio. I'm Ed Barker, this is Showmakers. I'll see you next time.